It,
So, hi everyone, it's Katrina here. I have Alan Gorthy with me, and this video is to introduce a new concept I want to try, calling it Evenings with Alan. And I am really keen to use the Willita Biodynamic Gardening book. It's such a good reference, but I know loads and loads of people that would like to be making more of the preparations, all of the preparations. And it's a big task, and it's really good to be able to bounce questions off people, have a conversation. And when I started Blue Borage, Alan was living in Auckland, and we had a few car trips going to workshops, boat trip over to Waiheke Island once. And I really miss the chance to go, Alan, what about this? And what about that? And how would it work with this? So hoping to recreate that using you, Alan, as a mentor and share that with other people. So I'm going to hand over to you to introduce yourself.
yeah, thanks, Katrina. So I am a biodynamic consultant, is kind of what I do. I have a business called Alan Gorthy Consulting, and I also do biodynamics mostly in viticulture right now. What I'm helping with, but helped with different types of crops from olives to vegetable crops to bananas in different zones and whatnot. And I also currently am doing biogrow auditing for organics. So things in that organic sector. And using biodynamics as a form of organic gardening is kind of my passion. So happy to help answer any questions.
Fantastic. Now, something I would really like to include each time we gather is a little snippet of something people can observe in the night sky. And I know I'm crap at looking up and being able to identify stars, but I know Orion. What would you, today is the 15th of March 2023, what would you sort of suggest to people in the next month or so, or for beginners just getting into looking up at the sky? I guess why is it relevant to gardening, farming? And yeah, what do you have to say?
Yeah, so I guess let's start off with biodynamics. Most people will have a familiarity or be interested in the moon, which is a celestial being that's kind of easy to see, when we're talking about it. But in my opinion, there's a whole bunch more out there. If you look and see all those other stars, there's lots of influences adding to our physical perception, and that's something I really focus on, is the actual, what we can actually see, be it in the soil, be it in the plants we're dealing with, or in the sky. So moving a little bit past the moon, and trying to get into familiarizing ourselves with either the ecliptic, which all of our constellations that we follow through our calendar are on. So briefly, that is just the equator expanded out into space, and that makes a line. So I won't go into that too much detail, but all of those constellations kind of fall on that line, which means you can see them from the northern hemisphere, you can see them from the southern hemisphere. They're in the middle, right? And they give us our seasonal patterns as we watch them progress from rising in the east to setting in the west. Down here in New Zealand, one of the bigger cultural significant constellations, which is part of a constellation actually, is Matariki, or the Pleiades. And it's a cluster of stars. It's found in the constellation of the Bull, which we're moving in, which be the next constellation we're moving into. And as we move into that, it's actually setting down here on the western horizon. So as the sun sets, kind of if you look from the sunrise looking towards upwards, or well, however you describe that from wherever perspective you're looking at. If you look upwards, you would see, if you knew where else, you see Aries, and then the next one would be the bull. Now that might be hard to find for some people if you don't know where it is, but it's kind of it's a clustery mass sort of situation. So it's not just one star, it's kind of a little bit bigger. So hopefully, you can kind of see a whole group of little stars together and go, oh, that's what it is. But if to also help orient where you're at, there is a red star, one of the red royal stars called Aldebaran, that is the eye of the bull. So it's actually in the same constellation. It's at one end of the constellation and the Pleiades is at the other. So Pleiades will be, or Matariki, let's keep it there, will be on the left-hand side, and Aldebaran will be on the right-hand side. So if you see the red star, you're looking towards the left to find the Pleiades or Matariki. There's only 3 red stars in the sky, and there's only 2 of them visible at that time. The other one is on the other, is on the other side, so you can't mistake that one. But we have a little bit of a wild card because Mars is sort of there too, a little bit. So there's a third red thing in the sky right there, but 2 of them are stars. Long story short there. The bigger picture, you've already mentioned it, is Orion. Orion constellation. I would hope the majority of people would be able to pick that one out of the sky, if you can. If you're looking at Orion from the southern hemisphere, the bottom 2 stars, the one on the left is Betelgeuse, and it's red. So you have the belt of Orion, and then you look down, there'll be a red star on the left-hand side. And if you track that now with your eye towards the left, you should find the other red star, which is Aldebaran. It's going to be at a little bit of a lower angle because Orion isn't actually on the ecliptic, it's just above it. So it's going to be down and to your left. So then once you find Aldebaran, you can find Matariki, and hopefully, and watch it do the last progression. So it's actually setting now for the summer season. And for us down here culturally, that means we won't see it again until it rises as a morning constellation, which is the beginning of the new year. So it's kind of that last glimpse to kind of close a chapter as winter starts to come in, and watch that progression go through. Again, it's something that will happen, you can see it for the first few hours after sunset. So you don't have to stay up too late to watch it. If you're in a mountainous area, you could still see it now. It's, I'm in an area that has some pretty good hills. So as long as you can get a little bit of a height, whatnot, or you're on the coast, it would be easier to see. But it should still be visible for most in the country.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. And if you see all 3 of them, if you can find all 3 red stars right now, they make a triangle. So you have Betelgeuse, Aldebaran, Mars. And so they're making a little triangle right now, which is kind of fun because now you're getting a little bit of planetary aspect as well as constellational.
Okay. It's listening to you talk about the planets, I often think, oh, it's not dark yet. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll go out and see it. So
yeah, some of those, just even like for me, like trying to do an hour or an hour and a half after the sun sets, or even an hour, even 30 minutes before the sun rises, because those constellations, when they're major stars, are going to shine out brighter. And so as the sun rises up, you can still see those bright dots, and those ones kind of form the bodies of a lot of the constellations. You don't need all the little stars in between. So it kind of makes things a little easier if you're in the middle of the night and say we're coming up on new moon right now, so the sky will be very dark. You can see a lot of different stars, and it kind of actually makes it more difficult to pick out the constellations because there's so much to see. So sometimes when you have a quarter moon, or right before the sunrise, sunset sort of situation, you're going to get more of those major stars, which are brighter and closer, well, just brighter for us. So they're easier to pick out, which is why those constellations are made from those stars, because they were the ones you would see easily.
okay. Thank you. and I'm
Yeah.
sure you'll talk longer about that, but let's move on. I wanted to bring some of my questions to this conversation, and each month or each time we meet, I'll get questions from people who are coming, so we'll have other people's questions, which will be more interesting than what I'm working on. But for me, I got myself some cow horns. These are from one of my customers here in the Franklin area. She's got Highland cattle, and I cut one down. So it was about 10 centimeters cut off the end of it.
Yep.
And got it into the ground. I can't remember the date I put it down, but I dug it up fairly recently, and I've got 2 jars of my very first 500.
Congratulations.
And yeah, it's exciting. Like, there was a moment where I couldn't remember where I put it in the ground. Like, I had 4 sticks and the sticks were gone. So it's yeah,
Well, you found it.
I found it. How do I know if it's a good batch or not?
So the first thing I would be looking at is to make sure that it's broken down all the way. So smell is a really easy one. It should not smell like manure anymore. That's a quite easy aromatic situation to find. So you want it to smell like forest floor, kind of like dirt, like real rich soil. So that's where I kind of start with it. And also feeling around in it, it shouldn't have the color. It should be dark brown all the way through. It shouldn't have any patches of green manure left. You want to, that's really the big key. Like, you want to make sure that the manure has had time to transform into the current state that it's in. Yeah, so those are 2 really simple ways to tell. And after that, I mean, the rest of it, you could put it under a microscope if you have something available, or a loop or something, just to see kind of the how alive it is, which is really good to see. But it should be moist too, like to the touch. So it should almost be slippery, like almost like moisturizer. So you want to kind of put it in your hand and it feels good, like not like it's going to dry out your hand. It actually should be moisturizing you to some degree. I enjoy just squeezing it in my hand. It shouldn't be dripping. So again, that's kind of the consistency. So, yeah, if you have those things, it's at its right moisture content, the smell is good, and the visual of the coloration of it, whatnot, is dark and doesn't have any bits of still manure to break down. You can always pick out some of that other manure if it's still in there. Say there's a little patch that in the center that was pressed so much, or the tip sometimes might not be all the way broke down. You could break just that part off and leave it to the side, or put it in the compost pile by itself, sort of thing, and use it. So don't discard it, because there's still life there. But if you're worried about it not being or storing well, you could always remove that type of part. It should also, there's usually a lot of, like, you'll see a bunch of white sometimes around it too, like in the horn. And again, that's going to be probably a sign of, well, it could be nematodes, it could be a little bit of fungal activity. So the idea is, in that horn, well, from my perspective, there's a influential situation as well, but from the physical, you're looking for a living entity to some degree, that when we're spreading that out, we're broadcasting life across our soils and adding those fundamental building blocks to soil life. So we're helping to feed our soil that way and encourage the other organisms to come in, have lunch.
Cool. When I tipped it out, I've heard a phrase that people talk about how the contents have turned. Like, there comes a point where it holds the shape of the horn even when you tip it out. Is that that's a good thing?
Yeah, you can tap it out, sort of situation. It almost kind of a little bit dries up to a point where it's almost the same shape. But yeah, sometimes those Highland cattle ones, they can be a little tougher because of the twists in them, to get them to knock all the way out. And I've had some people that cut the horns down, shaved them down to a smaller size to some degree. Just for two reasons: to make it easier to remove afterwards, and also to speed up the process. So if they put in a large amount, in some, it might take longer sometimes, and they're trying to have it available at a certain, time of the year. That's not for everybody, but those are just some things to think about when you're looking at like sizes of horns. I don't really, have much judgment on what the perfect size of a horn is. It's kind of, they're, especially if it's an animal from your flock and stuff, like those are, they're just, there's no wrong answer, I guess, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think one of the sort of recurring themes I wanted to hang on to is this phrase, practical biodynamics. Like, so many of the people I'm talking to are getting this idea that it's really hard or it has to be perfect. And a lot of it is intuitive and forgiving. And there are scales of quality. We don't have to be perfect all the time. Now, I think I sent you the story I put on Instagram when I emptied the horn. There was a great big fat worm in the middle of it.
Yeah. And you said, is this bad? And I said, no. So worms are,
it's not what we want. Like, we put the clay cap on the end
sure,
to discourage the worms, right?
yeah. So there's, a few different thought processes that, there's the belief that they just kind of show up because there's a food source sort of thing there. It could be that there was an egg, worm egg in with the manure already from, a worm had been into that, a piece of the dung that you'd collected and had left a egg sac already. And that was part of it that didn't get picked out, which are, they look like a little round kind of ball. If you've never seen an egg sac before, or a worm sac. So yeah, it got in there. And what's it gonna do inside there is have a heyday because, like I said earlier, the idea is that we're creating a lot of small living things, and worms are farther up the food scale or the food pyramid for soil. And so they're in there just enjoying all those nice little buffet of nematodes and different organisms, that it's about the third structure. Worms are about the fourth structure in the soil. So, they're eating and having, a nice little time inside there. And now, huh? Yeah, there'd be plenty left. Yeah, yeah. I mean, we're talking about billions of little organisms, so it's not like they're going to eat them all. It's just, again, I wouldn't say it's a negative to, I mean, it's, again, like you just said, if you were being very dogmatic about the perfect 500, not having a worm in there could be better, I guess. I don't know if I believe that, because I mean, at the worst, it's going to lay another egg sac or a few of them, and you're going to spread that out on to the farm with your little microbes that you're spreading out there as well. And you're creating, that they're going to show up and have food to eat. So you're actually nurturing your soil that way. But some people would see it as a problem because, oh, it's eaten some of it, or it's taken away some of the quality of the 500 while it's in there. I would, again, I just see it as a proof that you have living 500, because it's there. If it didn't have something to eat and sustain itself, it wouldn't survive. So I would take it as a positive personally.
Cool. Next time round, there will be other questions about skulls and flowers and stag bladders and different body parts. I was on a Zoom call with someone from Switzerland asking about biodynamic preparations in New Zealand, and she kind of said to me, well, what's stopping you? Like,
Making them.
it's not like you can't grow the plants. It's not like you don't have these animals.
Yeah,
What's the barrier? So yeah, that's my personal ambition, is to get
I
more of these
concur with them.
preparations done. Yeah.
There's only one that's difficult here, and that's ecosydum, because
Yeah.
ecosydum is a noxious weed, and so you can get it dried. You can buy it in dried, but growing it is
Yeah.
frowned upon, even though there are places in the country that already have it established.
Yeah. I don't mind if that one I can't do.
Oh, sure. No,
Now what else did I want to ask? Oh, do you want to say anything about the legalities of stirring this batch of 500 in the local park on my neighbor's land?
yeah. So I guess I don't know of any legal situation that would prohibit you from throwing water into the air, sort of thing. And 500 onto the ground. Um, Now, if you were doing something that was close to a food source, say a park that had a community garden or something like that, then I would definitely be a little bit more aware that though, in my personal opinion, spreading 500 at any time um, shouldn't have any problem like being sick, like whatnot, because we're talking again, like we did earlier, but that the manure is fully transformed. And so it's not actually going to be a pathogen at that point. So you have the bacteria and the fungi eating the bugs that could be of harm, sort of situation. But if you did have, a little bit of manure left in there, that was a little green still or whatnot, there could be a risk of E. coli or situation. So definitely, if there was a food source around, I would be more wary. Um, in most cases, if you were in a park that had trees or fruit trees, though, like again, if you're not splashing directly onto the trees, like there isn't going to be a bouncing effect, sort of thing. It's not floating in the air, whatnot. It's really just it's going to have to come into contact with something and then not be washed and then directly eaten. Um, if there's a water source around and whatnot that potentially it could be floating on or somebody's going to drink from, I would think that I would probably be cautious with that as well. Just again, I'd rather err in the side of caution um, than have somebody get sick or get a E. coli or something from from something that we were doing, or from some 500 that was spread around. But just walking through the park, I mean, you might catch a couple glances, but other than that, I don't see any reason why.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm used to being called a witch.
yeah, you're not disturbing anything. You're not vandalizing anything. You're not, um, yeah, doing
Yeah.
anything of harm. So I couldn't see the reason. If somebody was to ask me to stop, I would probably stop and just to be respectful to some degree. But I might try to have a conversation. But you know, I, I, I doubt that that's going to happen. I think you get more inquisitive situations than negative. But who knows?
Cool. No, thank you. Well, my hope is that these 2 jars of 500 get used up this year,
Yeah,
because
that's a lot of 500 to use.
that's the
Sure.
intention, isn't it? To actually spread it on as
Yeah,
much land
it
as
is.
possible. Yeah.
Stockpiling it doesn't do you much good. Like
Mm.
getting it out, I think it's at its most alive at that point, right? So if you're thinking again about that food structure, that the longer it sits, um, the longer those other organisms eat away at the bacteria and the fungal network that's in there, and they turn into amoebas and protozoas, and then once the protozoas get eaten by the nematodes, and then you're left with just worms again. So the more if you spread it earlier and you're getting that bacteria and that fungal onto your soils, then you can promote that life, and those billions that we're talking about become millions, become thousands, become hundreds, situations. So we want to spread the billions out there and get more of that out, and then let the other ones build up from there.
Yeah.
Get more
Cool.
coverage.
Okay. I've got
Good.
more questions,
Spread it around.
but we will wait for next time. Before we close this, is there anything you would like to share with people who maybe haven't met you before? Or what's your current learning edge? What questions are you sitting with about growing and soil?
so well, I really am into the planetary side of it. And so dealing with the wine business at the moment, I'm trying to track more of the planetary correlations to winemaking. So I'm looking at records of what would be a good wine year and seeing if I can correlate any patterns from, say, Mercury or from Jupiter, mainly at the moment. And then I'll probably move on to Venus and Mars at their balancing point too. But I'm kind of starting on the outside and working my way back towards the middle. I'm really interested in the phase of some of retrogrades of Mercury. So we can talk about that another time. But every year Mercury has 3 retrogrades and they're all in one sign. So you get all 3 influences of that element each year. And so I'm trying to think, if we have a good year every 4th year sort of thing, like, or do we always have a good year when it's in an air sign, or do we always have a good year when it's in a water? Yeah. So yeah, that's what I'm doing. Just doing a little bit of personal research on correlation to those planetary things. Cause again, we talk about the moon a lot, but those other celestial beings are there and their influence is just as much, in my opinion.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Katrina.
And, see everyone on Zoom sometime. I'm going to stop the recording now. Thanks, Alan.
Yes.